Welcome to the Executive Coaching Podcast, where Executive Coach Alicia Cowan will discuss leadership topics and coaching solutions to tackle the most difficult problems that keep you from leading your team to success.
Hi there, senior leaders. It's Alicia Cowan. Welcome to episode number 49 of the Executive Coaching Podcast. It is late September as I'm recording this, and I have a lot to be thankful for around the Cowan house today. We just got out of Hurricane Helene this week, and we were really minimally impacted. We're super lucky we're in Wesley Chapel, which is a little bit more inland from Tampa, and we're not on the water. And so really, we're fortunate to not have a lot of damage and no power outages and nothing really significant that happened to us. But I know I've talked to a lot of friends today that are not so lucky and really were hit pretty hard by the storm. So if that is you, my thoughts and prayers are with you. And hopefully, if you were impacted, that the rebuilding process is swift and smooth, because it was quite a crazy storm this week. So we are feeling very fortunate today to come out of that. And I will say the biggest impact around my house has been the kids are really been thrilled to be out of school for a couple of days. And so it's like the new snow day down here living in Tampa. They get the days off. And so they just think everything's just great because of that. So that's what's been going on around here. And so next week I am headed on the road. I'm going to be traveling for work into Las Vegas, which is always a strange place to be traveling for work. But as they do, it's a great place where a lot of big spaces and big conferences happen. And so I will be there for a couple of days. And so getting ready for that. And so what I wanted to talk to you about and get this message out before I head out on the road is to talk through the do's and don'ts of terminations. And that's going to be the topic for the day, because I think for me, I've spent, over 18, close to 19 years in the human resources space. And I've also been managing people and direct reports for about 24 years. And let me tell you, because of the work that I've been doing, I've seen and participated in a lot of terminations in my career. And I will say it never, ever is easy, and it never gets easier. However, what I have learned is that it can be done with a lot of grace, a lot of clarity, and a lot of respect for everybody that is involved in the process. I really can remember clearly and vividly the first time that I conducted my first termination, or even just was shadowing as a younger HR professional, a supervisor that was helping me learn the ropes and allowed me to kind of co-lead the conversation. I was so nervous and really thought I just really wasn't sure what to do. I wasn't sure what to say. I wasn't sure how I was going to turn out. And I just remember being so just all on edge at that time. And thankfully, as it does, experience has a way of teaching us what to do and what not to do in these moments. And sometimes, as much as you can read about it, study it, try to prepare for it, really, the only really way sometimes that you can learn how to do it is by going through it. And so, again, I will never forget that moment. But since then, I knew what I really wanted to do in those moments and how I wanted to be as a human being sitting across from another human being, having a really crucial, life-changing conversation. I knew how I wanted to show up in those conversations. And I will say, I know one moment that I can really also vividly remember of when I knew I was getting it right was a moment when I was out in the wild. I wasn't at work, and I ran into a former colleague, and it was actually someone that I had terminated many years prior to that date. And she didn't work directly for me, but she was a part of the organization, and we were going through some layoffs. And it was wild because she came up to me and said hi, and we talked for a little bit. And she thanked me for how I had treated her in that moment. And I'll never forget it. She was just so appreciative of the fact that I had just taken care and consideration and like how I carried myself with her and how I made her feel and how I was respectful and supportive and just kind to her in that moment. And I'll never forget it because I genuinely felt and thought those things that I had said to her at that time um, about how she had carried herself and her reputation and all the work that she had put in. And I just remember just having this exchange and how powerful it was for me. And it really stuck with me. And that's a big why for me about why I do what I do, to help people understand and how to coach people that you can lead a team and in the way that you can treat others, both in good times and when times are not great. There is a way, there are options, there are ways to do it in a way that can really be in alignment with your values. And so how this came up, I think recently I was having a coaching conversation with one of my clients, and we were talking through the topic of a termination that this leader was preparing for. They were getting ready and prepping for the conversation. And so we talked a little bit through how to really handle it effectively. And so as we're talking through it, it made me realize how valuable some of these lessons could be for anybody in a senior leadership role to think through. So some are some basic reminders, but I think all of them collectively together can be really helpful. So here are some of Alicia's golden rules, aka the do's and don'ts of terminating an associate. Okay, so here we go. So the first one that I have, and this is the one I think that I even let off with in this intro, is a big do. You can be kind, you can be clear, you can be professional, and you can be respectful. And when you're going through a termination, your first instinct might be to like rip the band-aid off and to get it over with as quickly as possible. But that does not mean you have to skip the humanity of it. And there's multiple different ways to do this, but one way I do like to recommend thanking the person for their work, all their contributions, and offering them proper praise where applicable. Because a lot of times when we're making decisions, sometimes it has nothing to do with the person whatsoever. Sometimes it has to do with a company and financial reasons and things that are outside of their control. And so I think in that moment to give humanity to it and appreciation where you can is really, really important. And again, sometimes it's not applicable for all situations, but I think a genuine appreciation can come across because clearly this person has worked for the company for some time and has put forward work and effort and added value. And so I think it's really a humane moment that you can offer as this conversation is happening. And you want to be honest, of course. And I think there's a way to do it and to preserve some dignity while you're having this conversation. And trust me, this is where a little bit of strategic coaching will come in handy because preparing for these tough conversations is exactly the type of thing that I help my clients tackle. And it helps them get through it with confidence and clarity from their angle in order to be fully prepared for it. Okay, the next do get to the point. Okay, so I have been, again, a witness to many termination conversations, and this is not the time to beat around the bush or for small talk and hemming and hawing and and ah. I have seen it go awry where it's not clear as to what the person is saying to the other person, and the other person is wicked confused. So the message needs to be crystal clear. And it is already an emotional moment for everybody involved. So do not leave the other person confused about what is happening. And sometimes my clients will ask me, they're like, okay, well, how do I do this without sounding cold? And I will say it is a balancing act, but there is a way that you can be direct and still empathetic. And together, that's what we do. We work through the messaging to make sure that it's clear and there's clarity for the person impacted without sounding like a robot. Okay. All right. Now the next do have the courage to do it face to face. And when I say face to face, it can be live and in person, or it can be over a Zoom or Teams meeting. But please, for the love of all things decent, do not fire someone via email or a direct message over Teams, Slack, etc. If you cared enough to lead this person as a supervisor, you care enough to have a live face-to-face conversation. Okay, so again, whether it's virtual face-to-face or in-person face-to-face, whatever is right for the situation, do so, but it should never be impersonal. Okay. And you read about this all the time. Like my LinkedIn feed can be like filled with horror stories of this going wrong and companies that really get it wrong. So I think about the impact, even though it may feel more comfortable. I think about the impact of these brands and these companies that do it in a very like cold and personal way, and the ripple effect that it has about their brand and about what it's like to work there. Okay. And then afterwards, I think it's important to continue the face-to-face communication with the team. You'll have to go out to their broader team and let people know. So you have to plan on how you're going to inform their immediate team and some of the broader teams with a lot of care and consideration. Again, I think this can be done in a different methodologies. This doesn't all have to be face-to-face, but this is a really big, important part of the transition plan to think out. Not just this person, but also the person or the people that this person works with and how you're going to communicate to them. And so that is something that I help leaders map out in advance so there's no gaps or lapses in the communication. Okay. The next again, I'm going to reiterate this again. You want to show respect and provide reassurance to the person and to the teams. And what I mean by this, you are going to respect this person impacted and then give them some space that they deserve. What I mean by that is you want to give them enough notification to let them know what's next in terms of the transition. You want to make sure that they have the details, but sometimes there is an emotional reaction, naturally so. Totally expected. So you might want to be able to revisit the conversation and be able to give them some space to have the reaction and then come back with some of those transition details at a later date. Because I always say this, sometimes when you're having this conversation, the person is flooded with emotion. They can't necessarily process what's being said. They're overwhelmed with emotion, and it's really hard to comprehend everything that's being said, especially when you're talking through a really detailed benefits or compensation transition plan with a lot of paperwork. It can be a lot. So I say that to say it's okay to have one shorter conversation and then to have a revisit conversation a little bit later, not because you want to drag it out or you want to have all of this, but I always say giving them the transition details and doing this in partnership with your human resources person, you might need to come back and revisit to be able to give them that reassurance. They're going to have all the answers that they need from you and the company. Okay. The next thing, you also want to give reassurance to the team. So again, with those transition plan messages, you need to make sure that the team has reassurance. If it is a company-wide reduction and you have finished it, let them know that it's all clear. If it has nothing to do with a company-wide reduction, it's important to know that they know that as well. So just really giving, again, reassurance and clarity and making sure that everybody is super clear on what's happening. Again, they don't need to know all the details, but they do need to be clear on what's happening and giving them that reassurance that they know where they stand as an individual. Okay. And so, yes, navigating all of this while keeping your own cool is an art form and one that I coach leaders on very regularly. Okay. All right. So now let's transition and talk about the don'ts, what not to do. Okay. Number one, do not emotionally react. Okay. I cannot stress this one enough. I've seen this as well. Do not cry. Do not get defensive. And you don't need to match any emotional outbursts that the other person might have. And you're thinking, Alicia, that sounds wild. Be like, I have seen it all. Okay. People in these termination conversations naturally have their emotions running high, and it's totally understandable. But on the other hand, if you are delivering it, it is your job to remain professional, calm, and composed. Okay. And so if they're getting upset, you do not equally have to match that reaction. Okay. And again, I've seen it all. And so one of the biggest challenges my clients can face is that composure and maintaining that calm presence. And if that is an area you struggle with, coaching can help you manage your own emotional reactions and help stay steady through the storm. Okay. Next up, oh, this is a big one too. Do not villainize the other person. Sometimes I see this happen, and this is definitely, again, you as a senior leader might be seeing this in employees that you manage as well, but don't make the other person the villain. Means that sometimes leaders will justify a termination, or they'll make themselves feel better about this termination by painting the other person as the quote unquote bad guy. Do not fall into this trap. It may feel easier to terminate someone when you believe they're the villain, but it's just simply not true, and it does not make the process any better. So it's all about trying to be fair in the situation and not creating any excess drama. So sometimes this happens because, again, I think we're trying to avoid the emotions that sometimes are associated with these terminations. And so sometimes we like to put blame on the other person. So catch yourself and your team if you see this happening. All right. Lastly, the big one, when you're talking about the transition plan and the transition of this person, you don't need to disclose a ton of personal information or a ton of the details to the broader team. It's just not important. I think you can be in line with your own integrity and your own value of like transparency to the team without disclosing all the intricate details of the termination, especially when it's related to performance. And it might feel very cathartic and very like calming to tell everybody, because you think, oh, well, I want them to know they're not going to be impacted, or it's just this person and what like they did. It might just feel good in your head, but trust me, confidentiality is key, and protecting the dignity of the person that you're terminating and really setting a respectful example for your team is really important. Because while in the moment they may be like, oh, wow, okay, that's interesting to know, they're also going to perhaps have in the back of their mind, well, what happens if I'm terminated, and how would people talk about me? And do I want that same dialogue to happen, or that same narrative to be said about me? And so you got to be really careful about how much you disclose. So just be really cautious about that. Okay. So in leadership, there are a lot of gray areas, and terminations are absolutely no different. But with lots of proper preparation and lots of mindset work, it's possible to do it in a way that is respectful, clear, professional, all while avoiding some of the landmines that might crop up. And so if you're finding yourself in these tricky waters often, or if you're not really sure how to handle some of these similar conversations, it's exactly where I come in as a coach. We can work through strategies that allow you to lead through these rough waters with confidence, especially when it's not easy. So as always, if you want help with any of this, please don't hesitate to reach out. I am accepting one-on-one clients for the fall and starting to book out my fall schedule. And I can't believe it. We're starting to look into 2025, which is amazing to me. So you can reach me through my website. It's Alicia Cowan Coaching. It's ELISIAKEOWN coaching.com. And I would be so happy to hear from you. So thanks for listening as always, and we'll talk to you soon. All right. Bye.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Executive Coaching Podcast with Alicia Cowan. If you're ready to have an executive coach who's ready to help you lead your team to success, then book an introductory call at aliciacowancoaching.com/call.